This is a story told in fragments, not filmed, not staged, just remembered. A promise kept in pieces and pictures. It begins in Coffee County, Alabama, tucked behind the bones of an old church that hasn't been used in decades. No working plumbing, no electricity, just an empty and forgotten building that watched over generations. Bethlehem Primitive Baptist was my great grandmother Esau's church, and it became her final resting place. My grandma passed away in 2011, and we took our first trip to Alabama after that. The trip was meant to inform my great aunt of her sister's passing, but during the visit, my mom and I toured the cemeteries where generations of our family were laid to rest. We felt so sad that so many were not marked, and she and I began to dream and plan to mark all of the unmarked graves in our Alabama cemeteries. Not for attention, not even for closure, but because memory matters, because everyone deserves a name and to be remembered. My mom passed away in 2023, so she never got the chance to do it herself. I promised that I would. Key and I took our first trip to Bethlehem Cemetery in March of 2024. The trip was meant to mark my great grandmother's grave. My mama called her Granny Esau. I called her Plump Dumplin. She passed long before I was born, but I knew her through stories. I knew her through faded photos. In my mind, she was a happy round woman who would giggle if her feet were tickled. The day that we got there to place her headstone, it was the sacred kind of quiet. But then I found something else. The two wooden post markers that marked my great-great-grandparents' graves were knocked over and nearly chewed to pieces by time, weather, and careless lawnmowers. The nails were still hammered into the woods. They spelled out Ezel M and Ezel P or D, we're not really sure. And those were their markers that were there for almost 100 years. But their graves, long forgotten by the world, were not forgotten by me. To say that I went manic is an understatement. I tried to fix them. I zip tied the nameplates to the splinters of the posts. It wasn't much, but I was still grieving, and it was my mom's birthday that weekend. It was so raw. In my frustration, I said something out loud. Something true, something dark, something secret, but something I think my great grandpa might not have liked very much. Key heard a growl. I didn't hear anything. I was so busy and focused and just trying to get those posts standing that I didn't really pay much attention, and we didn't talk about what happened in the cemetery until much later. We left there, they were standing. But weeks later, when we came back, the posts were down again. Bent, damaged, worse than they were before. It felt like a personal attack. It wasn't. It was just a lawnmower. But the air that day was so wrong. Not scary, just watched. And the promise wasn't finished, and it was weighing heavy on my mind. So we came home, and I built brick enclosures to protect those old posts. I found bird statues to watch over them. Their names again were fixed into place, and a few weeks later, Key and I drove across the state of Florida and into Alabama. This time, I had the enclosures, and I set them down with care, and then placed the posts inside. That third trip, we both felt it. Something watching, something weighing our every single step. Perhaps it was because the sun was just beginning to rise. Maybe it was the growl from the first visit. Maybe it was just something watching the progress. I don't know. We didn't talk about it until long after we pulled away. The posts stand now in their new homes, and the promise is at last kept. I don't know if my harsh words that day hurt anyone. Maybe they did. Maybe they were kind of meant to. What I do know now is that Mom and Pa Ezel are no longer unnamed. Granny Ezel finally has a headstone. And somewhere in that churchyard in Alabama, memory is still standing because a promise was kept. Bethlehem Cemetery is cared for by donation. I'm going to put the information to make donations to this cemetery in the description box below if you feel so inclined to do so. Thanks for listening to me talk to myself.